This episode of Lessons from Last Time is going to be one of the most special episodes we've ever had. And people ask me all the time, because I speak all over the place and I always talk about Guatemala. And I do video and I talk about Guatemala. It's very obvious when I've gone to Guatemala because I'm a better human every time. But people always say, like, why do you go down there? Who do you go down there with? It's like an organized trip. And it's really hard to explain. But my son was going on a trip. I got invited to go on the trip as an adult. I knew nothing about Guatemala. And I was like, I guess I'll go, like, whatever. My wife had already gone. And the connection for us to Guatemala actually comes from Camas, Washington. And so today on Lessons from Last Time, we get the person that's behind all of these things that I've been able to do down in Guatemala. Absolutely changed my life by my experience being able to go down there. And really, when I started this podcast, one of my thoughts was there's like a few people that if I could get them, it would be a dream. And one of them is here today. This is 𝗪𝗏𝗪. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Ken. That's quite an opener you got there.
Well, you're one of my heroes.
Thank you.
You've done the lives
Sweet.
that you've changed over your time has been amazing. I mean, lives that you've changed lives who then change lives, who then change lives, who then change lives. And you give people a chance and an opportunity, both who live in Guatemala, but also who live here.
Yeah.
And so I want to break down, because you have one of the best stories of all time, I want to break down the process of getting from the beginning to the end, because I've probably told your high school story to so many people of just this powerhouse who didn't totally love school.
Yeah.
So can we start there? Because it's an amazing story.
We can start there. Growing up, gosh, I was born in 1972, so that definitely dates me a bit. But back in those days, I just was a kid that was not like kind of the other kids. Back then, nobody diagnosed anybody with ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
That was just not something that happened. So I kind of just went through school knowing that I didn't learn like other kids and just kind of beating to my own drum. And that brought with it its typical, challenges. But I just always felt like led to go in that direction, whatever that direction was. And so as I got into high school, my parents sent me away to Bible camp when I was, goodness, I don't know, 15. And so that was a real pivotal time for me. I was pretty rebellious and I was pretty much, I'm not going to listen to anybody. And they were scared and they sent me off to Bible camp. So here I am at Bible camp. And that was a very pivotal moment of kind of finding my own faith, understanding who I was, working through my own neurodiversity. I definitely didn't identify, and we didn't have this language back then about this. I didn't identify as somebody like I saw the other kids and I was like, okay, they're more typical in the way they view things, the way they process stress, the way that they can manage things, and things were a bit harder for me. So I felt like through faith at that time, that was extremely grounding for me. And so from there, things got a bit better for me because kind of that angst, that teenage angst got a little bit more well controlled.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up saying to my parents, I had a babysitting job with somebody who had gone to Bible school in England. So I came home to my mom and I'm like, I've been thinking about this and there's this Bible school and it's in England. It's called 𝗪𝗏𝗪 and they have another one in Austria. And I really want to go to this. And my parents were like, oh, okay. That sounds okay. We could maybe do that at some point. I mean, I'm 16 at the time I'm saying this to them. So I ended up coming back to them right around 17 and said, I want to drop out of school. I want to drop out of school. I'd already been working at Nordstrom since I was 13.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, back then they'd let you work
could,
at Nordstrom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a stock girl, putting away clothes, but I didn't care. I just wanted to work at Nordstrom. So by the time I was 17, I was a sales girl and was making really decent money for a kid that age. So I was like, I'll pay for all of it. I will save up my money for a year, but I need to drop out of school. And then I will buy my Euro rail pass. I will buy my plane tickets. Because my parents were raising three other kids. They didn't have money to send their kid all the way over to Europe to go to 2 schools she wants to go to randomly and travel Europe. So it was all on me to do it. So they said, why don't you go see our friend who, I think he was a friend from church, Dr. Larry Ayers. I remember it. He was the head of the Portland Public school district at the time, and his office for some reason was in my high school, Grand High School. So they set up a time for me to go sit down in Larry's office. I still see the room, and I'm so nervous. He's a man in his 60s probably, and I explained to him my grand plan, and I don't really remember everything that he said back to me that day. I just remember he called my dad, and he said, my dad tells the story so well. He said, Ron, I just need to know, are you sitting down? And my dad said, well, should I be? And he's like, there's just some people that school is not what they're meant for. And I think there's something more for her, and you need to let her do what she wants to do.
Oh my gosh.
There's
It's
so
just
much incredible in that.
crazy.
Yeah.
I do love the story. I don't talk about it often, but having raised two kids and just seeing the difference in our culture now compared to back then, the fear I would have had in different, if my kid, the fear I did have at different times as a parent, living in the society as we live in it now, and to think my parents didn't, and they allowed me to just be me without any hesitation to see how that would flow.
There had to be
You know,
moments where either you or your parents or the gentleman you spoke to at Grand High School, the first thought had to be, oh, she's going through a phase, or she's
yeah,
rebellious,
yeah,
or she's
yeah,
just wanting to be nonconformist or whatever.
yeah,
And
right.
the other cool part about that is you had this own intrinsic self-awareness at a very young age
Oh,
that
yeah,
you knew,
yeah.
I don't fit here. There's something else for me to
Man,
do.
I
But
just
for
kind of accepted it.
everybody to
Yeah,
buy into that, there's something more going on here than just rebellion is a pretty cool thing.
yeah. I think back on it, and I would say my own internal voice as a kid was pretty well defined. You kind of, when you have a busy brain, I feel like there's the good things that come from that busy brain, and then there's the not so good things. The good things is it's going all the time, and if you could gear it into positivity, something like what I started happens. If you do not, and you go down the other dark road, that busy brain can, do the downward spiral to places you don't want to go. So I just think it was a situation where I went down the right road, and it did good things, I
Couple of
guess.
interesting things. One, girls are still to this day not diagnosed as
Yeah,
much with ADHD as
very
boys
true.
are. Boys are hyper and they
Yep,
present differently.
totally.
And also somebody that is, and I call it unhinged. Like
Mm-hmm.
one of my superpowers is I'm not hinged to like everything must be this way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what if it's not? What if it's something better than that? And so
Mm-hmm.
that unhinged
Yeah.
nature, like
Yeah.
you're saying, could sometimes turn out really horribly.
Yeah.
So absent that Bible camp, I wonder if, if your route stays rebellious or if do you sometime,
Oh yeah. Oh, 100. That's actually a really good point. I think all humans, not just humans that, have a more neurodivergent brain, I think we can get it unhinged without something that anchors us.
Mhm.
And, if I look back to that moment, at that moment, the anchor was going to Bible camp and finding faith. Even though I'd been raised in the church, you can make your kid be raised in the church and do all the churchy things and all those things, but it wasn't where I was at until it was where I was at.
Mhm.
And so having that opportunity allowed me to be grounded. Again, I'm not cognitively knowing any of this is what it was, but
Mhm.
now looking back on it, it's like, wow, that grounding allowed me to formulate my plan. And my plan was, it was there, but it needed to unfold in a very clear, free form,
Mhm.
Two things jumped out to me that are really powerful, and you hit on it, Ken. There's a principled foundation for your desire. It was your faith.
Oh yeah,
Right. So
for
there's a
sure.
principle supporting the desire. Then you brought this out just a minute ago when you
Right.
talked about, even if it's principled, you have to choose a direction. You have to choose an activity or an
Very
energy.
good.
So
Yeah,
those two things in common working
absolutely.
together leads you to a beautiful place.
Yeah.
If they're not, if you put energy towards, like you said, something negative or
Oh yeah.
harmful or hurtful, this could end up in a whole
A
different
whole
story.
different story. Yeah. And so I handed to my parents that, they saw that I didn't operate like, let's say, my younger sister. She's just bookworm, pretty straight A student, everything by the book. It was definitely not me. So they've got this unruly kid that they're like, she's all over the place. So yeah, definitely by channeling me in a way that it could lead me somewhere else, that was a positive.
When you didn't drop out, you dropped out with a mission.
Yeah.
You're just like, it wasn't just like, she shouldn't be in school. Let's let
Right.
her sit on the couch watching
No.
Netflix
No,
all
no,
day,
no,
which
no.
didn't exist back then. But
Well, yeah, that's true. And I didn't mention that the only thing that my parents said I had to do was get my GED. So it wasn't like, okay, you can go do your plan.
Mhm.
Back then, you could just go and tell the school you would like to get your GED and set it up for 3 nights in a row. So I remember I went to Old Hollywood District,
Mhm.
grabbed my McDonald's, brought my McDonald's with me, sat down, did all the testing. It was like 4 hours of testing, like 4 nights in a row. And I remember feeling proud that when the scores came back, that I could get into PSU. I
Mm.
remember thinking, I didn't think I'd even be, you know, because I mean, I hadn't taken SATs, I hadn't done, and I didn't like school. So it's like, you know, nowadays when kids come out of high school, we have this social media thing that just shows everybody, well, gosh, all these people, all these peers, they're going off to college and they're doing all these things with college. And I have to think to myself, what would have it been like for me if I would have had that social pressure
Mm.
to measure up, right? Like,
Mhm.
my God, I knew my best friend Courtney was going to go to a private school and or private university, and she had this big, thick book back then that she could open up, and she said, Heather, look at it, look at it. She kept trying to get me to want to go to college. And I go, Courtney, why would I go to college? I hate school. Like that doesn't make sense to me. And yet I've watched so many, my own kids, other kids that I know that did not like school. That was not their thing. They feel so pressured and almost ostracized if they don't fit in the box to go off to college. And that's troubling.
Mhm.
It's the relentless pressure of
Yeah.
normal. And one of
It's
the really
troubling.
cool
Yeah.
things you said in our phone conversation was, it took me a while to figure out, I viewed myself as not quite normal. And then I
No.
figured out there's no such thing as normal.
No,
We just allow ourselves to get boxed into what somebody else has
absolutely.
decided is normal.
Absolutely. So yeah, I do agree with that 100%.
And the other funny thing is you scored so high you actually could get into
I could've,
PSU.
yeah.
So people, Mindy likes to say it's not attention deficit, it's attention inconsistency.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
I can have massive attention,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I can hyper focus, and if
Yeah.
you give me a project,
Yeah.
I'll spend 4 hours staring at something. I just don't want to, do that all the time. It's just whenever I have to. Of course, I'll rise to
Oh,
the occasion,
absolutely.
but it's not in your box. I do not fit. I'm not. But
Mm-mm.
if I can create my own journey, then I totally can.
Yeah, totally.
So did
Totally.
you go off to London?
Yes. So I flew off to Salzburg, Austria, probably I think it was like 2 weeks after my 18th birthday, because obviously I had to turn 18. So I started with the fall or the spring term in a little town called Schladming, Austria. And then I spent a quarter there. Then I traveled all of Europe and
By yourself?
by myself, like just my backpack. I mean, I hung out with a couple girls from Bible school that I met. We did some backpacking, and then like after about a week or 10 days, I was just bored with them. They wanted to go do the Alps. They wanted to do that at that age. Now I'd love that at this age, but at that age, I was like, I'm going to Greece. I'm going to Athens. I'm going to Santorini. I want to spend the whole month in Italy. And they're like, no, we want to stay. I'm like, bye.
Oh
So
my
then I
gosh.
remember I called my mom from a payphone, and she's like, back then you just did it like once a month. It was really expensive to call home. And she's like, where are you? And I was like, oh, I'm in Italy now. And I just left the girls she's like, you're traveling alone. I was like, Mom, I know what I'm doing. I've got this. You do not need to worry about me. And I ended up, I spent a couple, almost 3 weeks, I think, in Bari, and I met a whole entire group of people, kids my age in Bari. I've got old pictures of Bari, Italy, and I still communicate with them all these years
Wow.
later. Some of them actually married the people that they were on the seaside with that year. So,
Oh my
I mean, it was
gosh.
just like, it was lessons that last a lifetime of I mean, you go and you travel Europe and you see all these things and you do all these adventures. So I ended up that summer, that would have been the summer of the Eurail Pass, telling my mother that I wanted to go to Romania. So how that came to be is when I was a child, I had a gal named Dory Van Stone, who the orphanage
Dory.
is named
Oh my
after.
gosh.
So Dory was one of the first missionaries to Papua New Guinea with her husband, back when it was still cannibalism, and I mean, no one went there. And Dory used to smuggle Bibles into Romania when I was a kid. So she spent a lot of time with my mom, and she'd stay at our house, and she'd sit at the end of my bed, and she'd tell me these stories about Romanian orphans and, you know, smuggling in the Bibles and all of this. And it just always really stuck with me. Something about it stuck with me. So I knew before I left that I wanted to work in an orphanage. So my parents had set everything up with somebody from the church. I can't remember how it was supposed to go, for me to be able to do that. So I took a train from Budapest, Hungary into Bucharest, and then was in Bucharest, Romania for about 2 weeks. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong. About a week, because I couldn't wait to get out. So I remember thinking to myself, this is the worst place I've ever been in my life.
Wow.
It was so awful. No 18-year-old. You have to remember, this is right after communism.
Right.
Okay, so here's this American girl.
Mhm.
She's been in Austria. She has, traveled all the cool places of Europe, but she feels like this. I felt this, that I needed to go work in an orphanage. And so I romanticized it, I guess. And then I
Mhm.
get into Bucharest, and it's like this ominous clouds, and like they used to call downtown Bucharest the gas chamber because there's no emissions on cars, and so everything just would box you and you couldn't even breathe when you were in the gas chamber on a hot day. And I came into all this, and whoever was supposed to meet me at the airport didn't show. So then I'm standing alone in this country trying to figure out what to do. I end up finding myself a hotel room. I end up followed by a guy the next day. I went to go get something to eat, and it was like this scary thing where I came back to the hotel room trying to get away from this person following me, and put all these suitcase things in front of the door, and he was actually going at the door. Like, the whole thing was so
Oh my
insanely
gosh.
terrifying. I couldn't make this up. And then I finally made it to an orphanage, thinking this is what I'm supposed to be here for. This is why I'm supposed to be here. And all these other things were terrifying me. And I don't really scare easy. And I didn't think I did back then, but it was scary. And I got there, and I remember walking in, and the orphanage director, she welcomes me into the orphanage, and it's just one floor orphanage. And the smell of urine literally like permeates you, like
Oh my
it just like
gosh.
hits you. And then again, right after communism, so the stuff that we all would have seen back then with 2020, all the kids in the cribs lined, flies everywhere. Like, it was real. It was super, super real. And this me being in there was before 2020 had covered it. So
Mhm.
2020, I think, covered it shortly later. So I
Not
stayed.
the year of the TV show.
No,
Correct.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
no.
Gotcha. Yeah.
no, they just
2020 had been to Romania and done a.
they did it, like, I would say maybe 6 months after my trip. So if I was there, I would have been there the summer of 1990. And then 2020, I think, did their first giant expose on Romanian orphans, I think maybe 6 months after I had made that trip. So I ended up calling my mom crying, saying, I need to get out of here. I don't know why I'm here. This doesn't make any sense to me why I'm here. And I need to fly out, because I think I was supposed to take a train out, but then they paid for my plane ticket to get to Budapest because I was just spent. And so I remember being on the airplane, looking out the window as I left Bucharest, thinking, actually praying and just saying, God, I'm never coming back here again. This is the most godforsaken place. I don't know why I even came here. I think I felt like I failed at something because I was supposed to be going there to do something good, but I was too scared. So then I ended up back home. My parents ended up flying me home before I went back to England because my fall term was going to start. And then I got a call from my parents in about the middle of fall term in England. We want to adopt one of the kids from your pictures from the orphanage.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So then they're like, we're raising 3 kids. You've been there before. Could we give you a power of attorney and a dossier? And would you go back and do
Can you go
the
pick up a kid for
Yeah,
us
would
over
you
there
go do
in the place you
Yeah.
said you'd never go back
Yeah.
to?
And I just was sitting there going, whoa. But yet somehow, even though those feelings were super strong, I never want to go back there. something in my gut just clicked. And I was like, I think I'm supposed to do this,
Oh, wow.
you know? And I was like, yeah, I can do it. So the girl that they were supposed to adopt, her name was Ramona. I sent a postcard because back in those days, you didn't
Mhm.
pick up a cell phone and call the orphanage director. I sent a postcard over to Dr. 𝗵𝗂𝗂, and I got a postcard back from Dr. 𝗵𝗂𝗂𝗂, like, I want to say like 3 or 4 weeks before I was supposed to leave to go to Romania to do my sister's adoption. She said, Heather, she's been adopted by Australians, but make your trip and I'll help you, to figure this out. So my parents were devastated because they really wanted to adopt. But then I did. I did go back, or I did end up going there. And I found my sister. It took me a month to complete my sister's adoption. I think I found her within the first 10 days, and she's a baby. And I brought her out when she was a month old.
And at this point, you're still 18 or 19.
I am still 18. I'm 18 because back then, the Portland airport, you could come to the gate, you
Mhm.
know? So I don't know who got wind of what, but all the news stations were there. Like it was like you can find old footage of it. Like, and they're saying teenager goes to Romania to do the international adoption of her sister. I mean, it was just everybody was there.
You made
Everybody.
you made so many references to your parents along this journey. And
Uh-huh.
it's just it's amazing that you had your own internal drive and your own determination that this is what I'm supposed
Yeah.
to do, this is what I need to do. But equally amazing as your parents' story that they supported this.
Mhm.
You made a comment about your mom's history, which led her perhaps to
Uh-huh.
have an openness or a willingness to
Yeah.
support your unique perspective and your unique adventures.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
I would say so with my mom, she struggled with significant mental health issues throughout my childhood. But with that, like, isn't everything a double-edged
Mhm.
situation? Um, did that make me have to be more responsible as a daughter? Absolutely. Anybody who's had a parent who struggles with a chronic mental health condition, they have to bear more responsibility. There's no question with it. But that also makes you more resilient and you have more grit. So I can see the positives of that.
Mhm.
The positive with my mom towards me is when I wanted to do things differently, or she saw me in middle school go into a really bad depression in middle school, a little bit past what a normal middle school depression should look like. She knew how to be there. She knew how
Mhm.
to process that. Like, and throughout the time, I lost her to COVID during COVID. Throughout her lifetime, because of her own struggles, she knew how to kind of meet me and let me do me. So, I mean, I think had I had a mother that was cut from a different cloth, was really just your, typical mom who, you know, cross the T, dot the I, and then they got me as a kid. What are you going to do with that? You're not going to know how to do it,
Mhm.
but she did. And so even though there definitely were, like I said, challenges of it, I don't know. I see the beauty from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I often tell people I had an unfair advantage growing up because my parents. Like when you have parents who understand
Mm-hmm.
you, especially with a kid, with ADHD, when your parents are patient, when
Mm-hmm.
they love you, when you can tell they love you, you have this unfair advantage in life. Like I get to do things because I have this confidence that comes from
Mm-hmm.
being raised by two amazing people.
Right. Right.
So it does help.
And I do feel like my confidence definitely it continued to grow off things that I was allowed to do. A ton of things they didn't allow me to do too, but when it like letting your kid take the bus and go work at Nordstrom at 13 and
Mhm.
starting small like
Mhm.
that.
Well, the world was so different
It
back
was
then.
so
It
Like even
was.
your
different.
story of Europe, I'd be like, I need find my friends.
I
I
know,
need to
I
watch
know.
you everywhere you go. I
Oh,
would
I
be
know.
our daughter drives DoorDash and I like watch the car to
No,
make sure she doesn't
we're
stop and crash or something. And like,
we're obsessed.
yeah.
I gotta say, I check myself all the time because I have two kids that are a lot like me. So, my worryometer I mean, I really got to watch that, man, because
Mhm.
I can get a little spinny, whereas they just need to, they're going to figure it out
Yeah.
eventually. You
Yeah.
know, they're going to figure it out.
So you show up back in America with your
Sister.
Romanian sister.
Yeah. Yeah.
And did you, when you left Romania, were you like, I'm going to go back or I'm never going to go back again?
No, when I left Romania, because I'd lived there for a month doing her adoption, I just felt completely called to help other people adopt. I
Hmm.
mean, it was a rush of, I can't believe I just did this. I mean, I went to court before a judge. I mean, I'm 18. Again, recounting this to you guys this many years later, it's like, really? Yeah, I did. I mean, I did. So I get off the airplane and all these microphones are just coming at me and they're saying to me, do you want to help other people do this? And I said, I do. And so then within the next 24 hours, we had over 70 phone calls to our home phone number
Wow.
asking if I would do their adoptions.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. I don't even know if you know the
I didn't know
whole
that,
story.
no.
I mean, I've told you pieces over the
Yeah.
years, but yeah. So all these people start calling. I tell my parents I'm going back. I said, I'm going back. I'll pick a couple of these people. I don't know how I chose, but I did. I think I picked two. And I gave
She's
them,
like, hold my sister. I'm getting on a plane.
yeah. And then they got their dossiers done. And my mother knew how to do dossiers, right? Because she'd just done her adoption dossier for her adoption. So she was doing that. My dad is running 𝗪𝗵𝗍𝗂𝐴's Fish and Chips in Hollywood District for 25 years. He's ran a restaurant, right? So, but we're all thrust into this. And I kind of am, the force that's saying, I'm going back. So I take off a month after I'm home, get an apartment in Bucharest, looking over this like enclave of like a little gypsy camp where like you'd wake up in the morning, you'd stand off, you'd look off your deck and you'd see guys chopping off chicken heads.
Oh,
Oh
wow.
yeah, it was wild.
Oh
It was
my God.
wild. Yeah, and then I started working on their adoptions.
If you are watching this podcast and you're in the mortgage industry and you haven't checked out the Knowledge Coop, you definitely need to dive into the Knowledge Coop. In there, you will find content and community that will help you grow as an individual by learning everything there is to know about the mortgage industry. If you think you know everything, just dive in and take some classes because there's always something more you can learn. To be successful in this business, you've got to continually learn. In addition, if you're a company and you want to teach your people in your own environment, we've got that in the Knowledge Coop Enterprise Services. So reach out to us, check out knowledgecoop.com. Definitely join Coop Plus. Let's get back to the podcast.
You talked about, in our conversation, you talked about how that celebrity status didn't sit well with you when
Oh,
it
gosh,
became
no.
oppressive because it wasn't your why. Your
No, it
why,
was
even,
not
and it
my
could have so
why.
easily become that as a young
No.
person. Wow, everybody wants to
Yeah.
talk to me. How cool is
Hey,
that?
And I got to tell you, that was a shocker for me.
You recoiled against
I
that.
recoiled it. And what is so weird about this is before deciding to go to Romania and do all of this, I'd always intended on doing this European Bible school adventure thing I wanted to do. And then my plan was to come back, go to Hollywood, and become an actress. I
Oh.
even had an agent, I had headshots. I was going to do it. Like that was I really believed I would do that. So then this thing happens and I go over, start doing adoptions. My parents come behind me. We form a 501(c)(3). We name All God's Children is the name of the organization we created together. And my life dramatically changes where everybody knows who I am from their friend groups. And then my mother goes and writes a book.
Mhm.
And then her book, people are reading the book. And then I'm Heather from the book. And I mean, I'm 20 years old, for goodness sakes. So I've got Bible study people from my mom showing up at the airport saying, hey, Heather. And I've been on 20 hours of flying. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, there was no privacy. And that was not my why. I did not do it I was just doing what I loved to do and wanted to do. I didn't need the notoriety and it made me highly uncomfortable. And I remember by my mid-20s, I was like, gosh, somehow God must have known that acting, although I would have loved acting, I would not have loved the other part because I'm a
Mhm.
private person.
Mhm.
And when you're in your 20s, you don't quite know who you are,
Mhm.
right? And then as you age into mid-20s and 20s, hopefully you're wrapping your brain around it. And I realized I definitely, although I'm an outgoing person, more of an introverted person. So yes, that would not have worked. The celebrities love
Wow.
it.
Hearing you talk a little bit about your kids, and I don't want to get too specific there because they're your
Yeah,
kids, but
yeah,
it was so clear that uh, there's a generational thing going on
yeah,
here. You are who you are in part because your parents created an opportunity for you
for
to be
sure.
who you are.
Right,
And your kids are who they are in part because you have created,
right,
because you learned at least that
right.
much about parenting from your parents, that they gave me the freedom to make some decisions that others might call crazy or
Yeah,
not normal or
for
whatever.
sure, for sure.
And you raised children in a similar method, or at least
Yeah.
in that context, in a similar method. Talk about the effect that your parents' willingness to be comfortable with who you are affected you as you became a mother and raised your own children.
As I raised my own children. I mean, I think anytime all of us as parents, you look back at the things you didn't like that your parents did, the things you did like.
Sure.
Definitely in terms of my mom and the freedom to be me. I would say I took that into my parenting style. I feel like it was harder for me though, because I do have more of that fear cycle, like what you were saying about looking where your kids are, and I've raised my kids in such a different society in which my parents raised me. I feel like it was harder. I feel
Sure.
like it was harder for me in a lot of ways, because back when I was a kid, nobody diagnosed me with ADHD, right? I mean, did you ever get
Nope,
diagnosed when you were
not till I
young?
was in my
No.
30s.
Yeah. I mean, at least I figured it out by about 27. I think I went to a therapist and I was like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? And, because my mom did have a severe mental illness, I was like going to the psychiatrist at like 27 going, hey, if I need to be on something, for God's sake, tell me what it is because I'll take it. And that's kind of where I came to, hey, I have ADHD. So with my kids with learning, I kind of think if I did anything wrong, I probably went to the strong side of the other side of, oh my gosh, okay, so you have learning differences, you have ADHD, let's get this diagnosed. Let's just, I mean, I was on it. And you're thinking as a parent, oh gosh, this is the best thing to be on it. And I will say, I don't have the right answer to this. I'm just putting it out there that it's been a journey for me because giving somebody a diagnosis also kind of gives them a box in a way, and especially now with social media and everybody and all these things that we've kind of been talking about today. And so I don't know, it'd be interesting if my kids were behind the mic, what would they say? Because I think I've given them the freedom totally to be who they are. I mean, in fact, I'm like, hey, you need to drop out of school. Do you want to do different? Like, I remember my daughter Lauren one time, like, she was struggling with stuff. I was like, do we need to do homeschool? And she was my kid who was like, no, I want to be like everyone else. I just want to be, she's 14 or 15. And she's like, no, I don't want this or that. And I was like, yeah, but, you could do it differently, and it's, you don't have to be like everybody else. And this, like, her mindset of that. Now she's 20, almost to be 25. And I've gotten to really see her go, okay, so I have some things here. I need to own them. They're less than ideal at times. I guess I'm a little neurodivergent like my mom, and she sees all the pieces and she's more comfortable, right? In that. So it's an interesting journey. I feel like watching myself back then, so much less stigma. And yet they say that there's less stigma now. I don't know about that in a lot of ways because there was less diagnosing then. I mean, there's pros and cons to the whole thing, but I could just kind of be without all these prying eyes, to do. But definitely, I always say to my kids, I'm like, you guys, you have more tools to have, parts of your inner being set well. Like, I didn't have those. Nobody was saying it. We didn't talk about these kind of things, people didn't talk about ADD. People didn't talk about mental illness. People didn't talk about any of these things. So that part's good. But yeah, my parenting definitely, in answer to your question, it's been evolving.
Yeah.
I would say I've kind of bridged, and it's still evolving. I mean, they're 20, it's soon to be 25 and 28.
I would argue that's the best way to approach parenting
Yeah,
is
I mean, I
open
don't
to
know
the
any other
process.
way.
Yeah.
Lots of
Yeah.
mistakes,
Yeah, of course.
and just reinventing the wheel on the weekly.
So this extraordinary journey that starts when you're 17, actually starts probably before that,
Yeah,
but
okay.
it gets executed on when you're
Yeah.
17, has led you down this amazing path to Romania and adopting a sister
Mhm.
and then adopting for other people. Where has that taken you now today? Where have you
So
arrived today in your journey?
where it kind of went was we started that. So that started in February of 1991. So for February until 1991, all the way to about 2010, I ran All God's Children with my parents. And good night, we went to so many different countries. I worked in Bulgaria. I lived in Bulgaria for 3 years. I lived in Romania for several years as well. Over that, that's a pretty big time span. I ended up going to Guatemala during the time of running All God's Children, and I basically started an orphanage. So when my daughter was a year old is when I started. In fact, I was not with my daughter on her first birthday. I was in Guatemala, and she came down 2 days after her first birthday. I just remember crying in the hotel room going, oh my gosh, I'm the worst mother. I'm not with her.
Oh,
And I remember my mom going, she doesn't even know, honey. She's, So yeah, so she's going to be 25. So that's how old Dory's Promise is. So somewhere around 2010, I left All God's Children. My parents were kind of starting to go towards retirement. My sister wanted to run it. I came to a place in 2010 where it was time. It was just time. By that point, I'd gone through a divorce. I'm a single mom. I'm raising 2 kids. The intensity, I mean, I'd been running All God's, I mean, I created it and then helped run it from the age of 18 till, goodness, how old was I then? I don't know. I was probably
38?
35,
Yeah.
37. Yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah, 37, 38. Yeah, good math.
It's
Yeah, yep, there.
unhinged.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just was like, I was feeling myself not being able to juggle all the balls and not being okay with that, but not really wanting everybody to know I wasn't okay with it. I mean, no, it was too much. It was too much. So I had the ability to step away from it, start a different organization. So that's when I started Forever Changed.
Hmm.
That fit more with my goals at that moment, which is I am a single mom who just wants to raise my kids and be a good mom. That's enough for me. Yes, I've done all these adoptions. By that point, I think I'd done like 2,000 adoptions.
Oh my gosh.
I'd done a lot of stuff. I'd opened a lot of programs and built a beautiful organization. My sister had been working for All God's Children since she was out of college, I think, and she wanted to run it. So my sister still runs All God's Children today. She does a beautiful job with it. She's all over the world. She's expanded it. She loves bigger, better. She goes. It's awesome.
I think my brother was on the board for a little bit or
Was he?
something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
He called me because he
it's a
met her
big
totally
organization.
separate, and he's like, "So you know Heather?" I'm like,
Mhm,
"Yeah." Like
yeah,
what? Yeah.
Yeah. So she runs All God's Children, and I run Forever Changed, and I'm able to keep Forever Changed just the orphanage in Guatemala. Once upon a time, back when I made all these choices in 2010, I thought, oh, I'm gonna, expand and go other places. And yeah, I haven't yet.
Mm.
There is another chapter. I haven't figured it out. I'm trying to figure it out. All of life's, that's why I like your lessons from last time, because all those lessons from starting all of this to now lead up to, I still think there's something I meant to do from all those lessons learned.
Mhm.
Not totally sure what it is, but like you said, we don't have to know.
Yeah.
I think it will present itself.
Talk about Dory's, because I know I want people to understand the concept
Yes.
of Dory's. Dory's Promise is where we stay when we're down there. Now we stay at a hotel,
Mhm.
which actually was pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys. We had to make that choice, or it was tough because we had people staying on site with our kids.
Mhm.
It's just not what's best for our staff, and it's not what's best for our kids. Obviously, people who go on mission trips, they love to be on site,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, it was disruptive to routine, and yeah,
When our
it's working
18-year-olds
better.
got older,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
because when you're 18, you're pretty much in a state orphanage in Guatemala. They
Right.
just kick you out the door.
Right.
And we've got kids that have now passed 18 and we're sending to college. So,
Right.
and it's so funny. I always say we when I talk about Dory's.
Yeah,
People
I
are
love
always
it.
like, so how much, like, are you on the board? And I'm like, no, I just go.
I
And
just
they're like, oh,
go.
it's we. I'm
Yeah.
like, but our kids, we have 40 kids. We have room for 40 kids. We have like,
I love it,
and,
kid. I
but
love
it's,
it.
I've gone
You feel like
8
family. Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it is because
Yeah.
it's the same kids. So when you
Yeah.
first went there, adoption used to be, and I
Yeah.
think when you got there, was adoption legal, or did you get there
Yeah.
after?
No, when I got there, I was going down there as the head of All Guts Children. So I was going down there to do international adoptions and have the kids that I was doing international adoptions for stay at the orphanage I chose to create. I chose to create the orphanage because I was realizing in Guatemala, if we didn't create our own orphanage, we would be dealing with like these middlemen that kids were coming to them. They weren't caring for them well to be adopted. It didn't feel right to me. So I called my parents at the time and I was like, I don't see any alternative because I think we just should do it ourselves. We should have our own orphanage. This isn't like Romania where the government gets involved and won't let you have your own orphanage. They're just like, sure, you want to open an orphanage? Go for it. So like literally within 2 months, I had opened up an orphanage in 2000. So we ended up, goodness, at one point we had 100 and can you imagine, Ken?
In those 4 houses?
We had there's 8 houses. So if you look at that whole block, right? There's 8. We had 7 of 8.
Wow.
And we had 140 children at one point. Then when international adoptions closed, because international adoptions not only paid obviously for the person to adopt the child, but paid for the running of the orphanage because we made sure we had a fee that helped us run the orphanage as well. All that went away. So then we had to come up with another income stream in which to keep a part of the orphanage open. And so that was the 40 kids, like that's what we came up with. We can keep this orphanage open with 40 kids because they're not going to be adopted because adoptions they closed and adoptions are still closed. So these kids that are with us are with us through adulthood. And yeah, that's
There's
like
such a
that.
legacy here. I mean, I can't help but think about how your parents handled you, how you've worked with your kids, how you engaged with your sister, and now she's running this thing that you started and doing great work
Oh,
with
she's
it,
doing great work.
touching
Yeah.
lives and affecting people all over the world. And then somewhere along the line, you do this thing in Guatemala, and some dude named Ken Perry gets involved through one of your kids.
Yeah.
You said.
Yeah.
And now all these other people through the Knowledge Coop who've participated in a Guatemala trip,
Right.
kind of attribute it to you, which is great because you promote it and
Right.
but then you
He's
start
so great.
looking back at all the things that have happened, the dominoes that have fallen because you acted on
Yeah.
and you were willing to be different, to be
Yeah.
not normal, to be by
Yeah.
some considered odd or nonconformist or whatever.
Yeah.
And look at the legacy that that's created.
I think that when people can do that, and I still remind myself that even now at this age, like whatever choices I make between 50 and 80, like what things can be just that may be different. It's funny, you become, or at least I see this in myself as I become older, less flexible. Like, oh, I like my routines. And then as I want to break myself out of that because in breaking myself out of that, sometimes the best things happen. I think that's important all the way through.
I love what you said, that you don't know what's next, but you can this is how I describe it anyway. I see the bend in the road up
I
ahead.
see a bend.
I don't know what's beyond it, but I'm
I
so
see it.
jazzed to
I've
get
seen
there,
it.
right?
I've seen it.
Yeah.
And I feel like once you get to a certain age, it's all these different things, right, that you've had happen in your life that you just have like this kismet moment where you go, oh, so that's what I'm supposed to do next. And I don't know,
Or
but
even,
I know it's there.
that's why that happened.
Or that's why that happened. Yeah.
I can see the fruit of that decision now. Looking back.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I really wanted to have you on the show, like from the beginning, my first thought of I would love to get Heather on the show is because sometimes people, especially kids who deal with ADHD, think there's no way I'm going to be, and gosh, I'm getting teary.
I know. I get it too.
They think there's no way I could be successful. There's, I'm not good at school, therefore I must not be good at anything. Look at everybody else and all that. And my goal is to have people see here's this girl who grew up, who had
Yeah.
every excuse to not do well, who could have totally gone off the rails, um, and connected with what I'm like, why am I here? What am I built for? And what's my amazing adventure ahead of me? You connected with that. And
Right.
because of that, lives have been changed for years and years and years. Thousands of lives have been changed because of this. And I really want to showcase that, like that you weren't just, yeah, everything was given to me. I had everything I ever needed. And I,
Right.
was a straight A student. I just excelled at school. And after Harvard, I went and started an orphanage. I
Yeah.
mean, it was like, I'm just a girl who had a passion and a dream, and
Yeah.
also was not stuck with what I'm supposed to, or what the world thinks I should be, but had a more of a vision of like, I bet I could do something amazing, or I bet if I follow these, things in front of me, I bet I could change some lives. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing to hear that story, just because this, you shouldn't have been this good is what the world would say.
Oh,
And yet you were
absolutely.
gifted for this. Like, this is what you were built for.
Yeah. It's just, I guess, out of the box thinking, which I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm with you in that our young people nowadays, like, just for them to have that self-belief and to follow their own heart and their own passion, and even know how to look for it, is so incredibly important. And yes, people who struggle with autism and people who struggle with ADHD and all these different neurodivergent ways of looking at things where they feel so ostracized, I'm super passionate about that, because it shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be. And the world preaches, we're going to be more inclusive and we're going to be this and that. And I think the world's gotten a little better at it, but long ways to go.
Long way to go.
Long ways to go, for
2
sure.
nights ago, Aria asked me, she said, if you can go back to the beginning of your life and not have ADHD, would you do it? Would you give up ADHD from day one? And I said, not on your life. Like
I wouldn't either.
and be locked into
Mm-mm.
being good at school and like sitting in class and being
No.
like, do. Like, I love my ADHD.
Well, I was going to suggest to our audience, after they watch this amazing episode, and I think they're going to love it, go back and watch the 2 episodes with you and talking about your journey with ADHD,
Oh, yeah.
and the
Yeah.
two conversations combined
Yeah.
will be
Mhm.
profoundly powerful. I can't help but think about the people who go to Guatemala because of you.
Mm.
And they attribute it to you. Ken, this great guy from the Knowledge Coop, does these cool trips to Guatemala, and we get to go down and serve in an orphanage and do these great things. And they don't even know the legacy, which is fine. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not looking for TV
No,
cameras and all
no.
that anyway. But now, if they watch this, they hear the legacy, and who knows what they're going to do with their experience of being in Guatemala and being affected and changed by what's happened to them while they're down there.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that when you said that, I'm very uncomfortable with you saying that. Like, I totally get it. When you came back, you're like, this isn't about me. Like,
Yeah.
I hate this when people like showcase it, like, oh, look, Ken's bringing people to Guatemala. No, it's not. Like,
Yeah.
I love that you said it or whatever, but like, I get uncomfortable because it is about the mission. It's about I'm so happy with other people's experiences. I never think of my experience, right? I think
Right.
of like, yeah, I was the conduit where like I just said something and people are like, okay, I want to go. But when you go, and this is where it's been so amazing for people, when you go to Guatemala, your life changes. Like, that's every single person that's ever gone. Their feedback to me is that changed my life. Like, that it's such an amazing thing that all I'm doing is opening up the door for them to walk through and meet these amazing kids.
I think it's conduit.
It is.
You're a
Yeah.
conductive agent. You
Yeah.
allow yourself to be conducted, and people have their own experience.
Yeah.
It's not,
And
it's
I
not
have
the
the
Ken
honor to
Perry
watch
show.
it. Like,
Not the Heather show.
Yeah.
You get
It's-
to watch lives change.
Yeah.
Like, you get to
It's
watch
really
people
cool.
go down, and there's a lot of groups that have gone down every single year.
Yeah, for sure.
And you get to see that and go, all right. But you
Yeah.
don't really sit in that. You just go, this is,
I just know it's going on.
yeah.
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 Yeah,
Sure.
without question, we could sit here and talk for a couple hours. I'm absolutely
Mhm.
confident of that, but we have some time limitations. And I want to say this, Heather, if people are watching this and they are just really touched by or curious about your experience and what you did, they might want to reach out and get a hold of you to hear a
Sure.
little bit more.
Yeah.
What would be the best way for people to reach out to
They
you?
would just go to our website, which would be foreverchangeinternational.org. And there's going to be an address there. There's going to be a phone number. A way in which people can get involved is like what Ken's done is he just called me up and said, I want to lead a trip.
Mhm.
That's usually how it happens. I will say, since COVID, our numbers on trips have dropped like
Yeah.
tremendously. And where that is not good for us is that is an income stream that helps us run our orphanage. Now, granted, there's the built-in cost to conduct the mission trip, but then there's also a built-in cost that helps us run our orphanage. So when people are coming down, yes, they are getting something for what they're paying, but we're also getting income that helps
You
our
bet.
kids have a roof over their head and wonderful
Food to eat.
teachers. And I mean, we run an amazing home with amazing staff. I mean, it's not like the orphanage that I went to all those years in Romania. They're as beautiful as our own homes, and they have teachers and psychologists, and we
have a
have
chef.
everything. Yeah,
And
we have
one
a
of our
chef.
kids
Yeah.
is a chef now.
Yeah.
Well, we will post the graphic of that
Yeah, for sure.
email or that URL on
Love to have
episode.
people join us for sure.
Yeah, and
When
who
you
knows
can-
who might respond to that and
Yeah.
reach out to you and become the next, again, I'm not trying to promote Ken Perry
The
here,
next
but
Ken
the next
Perry.
person to step
Yeah.
up and
Does
say,
it,
ooh, I
yeah.
want to bring
Yeah.
people down
Right.
there. This is really great. I want to be a catalyst as well, or a
Absolutely.
conduit as well.
And the website, do we still have the kids on the website?
Yes. we
Okay,
do.
so I've kicked a soccer ball with every kid on the website.
Uh-huh.
So these are kids. I used to have a hard time back in the day when you'd see the adoption commercials, like donate monthly to this kid or whatever. I'm like, does that kid really
Yeah.
exist? Or did I see that kid on another commercial too? These kids are all, they live in our orphanage. You can adopt, you can sponsor kids. There is no international adoption in Romania, but there's still the opportunity to sponsor kids. That
Right.
also helps us. And it's actually a super special thing. I've seen where parents or families will adopt a kid or will sponsor a kid, and they'll get to go down and visit and hang out, and it's super
It's
special.
really great. Yeah.
And you can do that on the website too.
And so it is, it's a sponsorship program, and it is great because then if you do go on a trip, you actually get to, meet them, and that is pretty cool.
And we have a kid in nursing school, I think. We have a kid in coding school.
Yep. Yeah, they're all getting older.
Yeah.
Medical school.
Yeah.
Myra's in medical school.
Oh my gosh.
So
Incredible.
yeah,
I wish we had the time to tell
our
Myra's
kids
story
are-
because she has the most
kids are getting
amazing
older.
story.
We
Yeah,
might have to
that's-
do this again.
Yeah, I'm in. Yeah.
You're up, Bubba.
All right. We have one question for you.
Okay.
Final question.
Final question. Oh my goodness.
If you were to go back to 10-year-old Heather
Mm-hmm.
and give 10-year-old Heather one piece of advice based on everything you know now, everything you've learned along your way,
Oh man.
you get to give her one piece of advice as a 10-year-old. What do you tell her?
Boy, that's a tough one, Ken. Just keep doing you, even when things are tough, and things are gonna get tough, and you're gonna have some like darker times in your lifetime. You gotta keep going. It's like the carousel doesn't stop turning. You just gotta, and you're gonna get through it. You're gonna figure it out. You're capable. You are enough. I would just say that again and again and again until 10-year-old Heather goes, okay, because you have those times throughout life that you're like, I'm not enough. I can't
Of
do
course.
this. This is too much.
I'm not good enough.
I'm not good enough. I mean, by 50, I'm like, you know what? I'm good. But like, 20s and 30s,
Yeah.
heck no. Like 20s were just brutal. And you would say, well, how are they so brutal? You had this amazing, you did all these amazing things. Oh, that's the beauty of the story. There's the internal world of the pressure of life, no matter what. So yeah, I would tell her, you got this, but it's going to get dark at times. It's going to get really hard. You're going to think you can't, but you can. Keep going.
If ever there was a lessons for last time message to close out a conversation with, that's a pretty darn good one.
That's the one I would say.
Heather, thanks for spending time with us
Thanks,
today. It
you
was
guys.
awesome.
It was
Absolute
fun.
pleasure.
My first podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We
So
were
there you
in.
go.
Yep.
It was you, Ken.
So amazing.